What's up, Grayson Report? I am back with another video, and I know a lot of you have been checking out Netflix, especially during spooky season, and have been watching Monsters, the Ed Gein Story. There's also two others. There's the Jeffrey Dahmer one and Eric and Lyle Menendez. Ryan Murphy, we found out, especially with the previous one, the Eric and Lyle Menendez story, that Ryan Murphy likes to take liberties, and I understand why he does that. It's trying to make the story interesting. He wants the shock value. He wants to come back and make another one, and he is making another one. He is making another one. It's I believe it's filming now here in Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken, and it's the Lizzie Borden story. So, but just remember when you do watch these that he does take liberties and the story is not exactly true. But if you want to know what the real story of Ed Gein is, stay tuned after this. I haven't finished the Ed Gein story yet. I have a few episodes left, and once that's done, I am definitely going to give you my review. But first, we are going to dive into the story behind the man, the Plainfield butcher, the man that literally inspired Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and more recently, which I didn't know was Silence of the Lambs, I guess it was Buffalo Bill, the character. But here is the macabre story of Ed Gein, the serial killer who used human body parts to make furniture. For years, Ed Gein holed up inside his dilapidated home in Plainfield, Wisconsin, as he carefully skinned and dismembered his victims to fashion everything from a chair to a bodysuit. Most people have seen classic horror films like Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs, but what many may not know is that this terrifying villain in these three movies were all based on one real-life killer, Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield. And if you don't know, if you've been underneath a rock and you don't know who Ed Gein is, or you don't know what he looks like, this is what he looks like. Charlie Hunnam has done an amazing job portraying him. He really does look like him. I think he's better looking, to be honest with you. But if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Stay tuned for my review in the coming days. When police entered his Plainfield, Wisconsin home in November of 1957 following the disappearance of a local woman, they walked straight into a house of horrors. Not only did they find the woman they were looking for dead, decapitated, and hung from her ankles, but they also found a number of shocking, grisly objects that Ed Gein had crafted using human body parts. Police found skulls, human organs, gruesome pieces of furniture like lampshades made of human faces and chairs upholstered with human skin. Gein's goal, as he later explained to police, was to create a skin suit to quasi resurrect his dead mother, with whom he'd been obsessed for years. This is the disturbing true story of Ed Gein, the murderer and grave robber whose atrocities remain uniquely haunting to this day. Ed Gein's early life with his overbearing mother and his first unaliving. Born Edward Theodore Gein on August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Ed came of age under the influence of his religious and domineering mother, Augusta. She raised Ed and his brother Henry to believe that the world was full of evil, that women were vessels of sin, and the drinking and immortality were the instruments of the devil. Augusta tied many of the teachings she preached to her sons back to the Bible. Every afternoon, Gein and his brother would hear their mother read from the Bible, usually from the Old Testament of the book of Revelation. Despite his mother's harsh treatment, Gein came to idolize her. So this is what the real Augusta Gein looks like. Frantic to protect her family from the evil which she believed lurked around every corner, Augusta insisted that the move from La Crosse, a sinkhole of filth, she thought, to Plainfield. Even there, Augusta had the family settle outside of town since she believed that living in town would corrupt her two young sons. As a result, Ed Gein only ever left his family isolated farmhouse to go to school, but he failed to establish any meaningful connections with his classmates, who remember him as a socially awkward and prone to odd, unexplained fits of laughter. What's more, Ed's lazy eye and speech impediment made him an easy victim of bullies. Despite all of this, Ed adored his mother. His father, a timid alcoholic who died in 1940, cast a much smaller shadow over his life. He absorbed her lessons about the world and seemed to embrace her harsh worldview. Though Henry sometimes stood up to Augusta, Ed never did. So it's perhaps not a surprise that Ed Gein's first victim was likely his older brother, Henry. It is not confirmed, ladies and gents. Um, they want to say it is, but it's not confirmed. In 1944, Ed and Henry set out to clear some vegetation in their fields by burning it away, but only one of the brothers would live through the night. As they worked, their fire suddenly got out of control, and when firefighters arrived to put out the blaze, Ed told them that Henry had vanished. His body was found soon afterward, face down in the marsh, dead from asphyxiation. At the time, it seemed like a tragic accident, but accidental or not, Henry's death meant that Ed Gein and Augusta had the farmhouse to themselves. They lived there in isolation for about a year until Augusta's death in 1945. Then Ed Gein began his decade-long descent into depravity. The horrific crimes of the Butcher of Plainfield. So this is one of the pictures of what the interior of his home looked like. Obviously he lived alone. He didn't really have a woman's touch. I know they kind of dabbled with that in the Netflix series. They mentioned like he could use a woman's touch. But obviously he looked like he didn't clean or anything. He kind of just left everything a disarray. Following Augusta's death, Ed Gein transformed the house into something of a shrine to her memory. He boarded up rooms that she'd used, keeping them in pristine condition, and moved into a small bedroom off the kitchen. Living alone far from town, he began to sink into his obsessions. Ed filled his days by learning about Nazi medical experiments, studying human anatomy, consuming porn. I don't know. I know this is coming from All That's Interesting, but I've read also that with the Nazi influence, because I know it's big in the Netflix series, that it's not confirmed, but the way the stuff that he did kind of reminded people of the Nazi experiment, so it's not confirmed. I don't know about the porn thing. I don't know, honestly. I was questioning that throughout the whole series. Um, so that's one thing I think is also up in the air. How do you really know unless he confessed to it? You know what I mean? Though he never attempted to date any real life women and reading horror novels, he also began to indulge his sick fantasies, but it took a long time for anyone to realize it. Indeed, for a full decade, no one thought much about the Gein farm outside of town. Everything changed in November 1957 when a local hardware store owner named Bernice Worden vanished, leaving nothing behind but bloodstains. Worden, a 58-year-old widow, had last been seen at her store. Her last customer, none other than Ed Gein, who'd gone into the store to buy a gallon of antifreeze. I'm thinking, like, how did he go this long without being caught? But you have to think back then they didn't have the technology or the investigation techniques that we do now. And plus the fact too, I feel like he was so isolated out in the farm, and the way he acted, I don't think anyone thought didn't think otherwise, if you know what I mean. Police went to Ed's farmhouse to investigate and found themselves in the middle of a waking nightmare. There, authorities found what would later inspire horror movies like such as Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What investigators found inside Ed Gein's house. As soon as investigators stepped into the Gein's house, they found Bernice Worden in the kitchen. She was dead. headless and hung by her ankles from the rafter. I've also read somewhere else that they found her in the barn, so I don't know who to believe. There was another article that I read that said they found her in a barn. So there were also countless bones, both whole and fragmented skulls impaled on his bedpost, and bowls and kitchen utensils made from skulls. Worse than the bones, however, were the household items that Ed Gein had made from human skin. So here's another picture of his house. Again, it's in disarray. It just pretty much looks like he just through years of trash and whatnot, didn't pick up after himself for anything. Authorities found chairs upholstered in human skin, a waste bucket made of skin leggings, or skin leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from faces, a belt made of nipples, a pair of lips being used as window shade drawstrings, a corset made of a female torso, and a lampshade made from a human face. Along with the skin items, police found various dismembered body parts, including fingernails, 4 noses, and the genitals of 9 different women. They also found the remains of Mary Hogan, a tavern keeper who'd gone missing in 1954. So this is his bedroom. This is where he slept. Like, he was literally sleeping on. I don't know if he was sleeping in here or what, but this is his bedroom. So look at the bed. It's just springs. And also too, imagine the smell in that house. Like when the authorities came in there, there's no way there could not have been a smell. There had to have been some sort of smell. Ed Gein readily admitted that he collected most of the remains from 3 local graveyards, which he started to visit 2 years after Augusta's death. He told police he'd gone to the graveyards in a daze looking for bodies that he thought resembled his mother. Ed also explained why. He told authorities that he had wanted to create a woman suit so that he could become his mother and crawl into her skin. How many people did Ed Gein kill? Following the police visit to Ed Gein's house, the butcher of Plainfield was arrested. He was found not guilty by reasons of insanity in 1957 and sent to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Then his farmhouse mysteriously burned to the ground. 10 years later, Ed was deemed fit to stand trial and was convicted of the murder of Bernice Worden, but just of Bernice Worden. He was never tried for Mary Hogan's murder because the state allegedly saw it as a waste of money. Ed was insane. They reasoned he would spend the rest of his life in hospitals either way, but that raises a chilling question. How many people did Ed Gein kill? Until his death in 1984 at the age of 77, he only ever admitted to murdering Worden and Hogan. But it is possible Gein didn't stop there. At the time, investigators suspected Gein was involved with the disappearance of 4 additional people. The first of these disappearances was 8-year-old Georgia Jean Weckler, who disappeared from Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. That is a tongue twister. On May 1st, 1947, that afternoon, the young girl received a ride home from school from a neighbor. The neighbor dropped off Weckler on Highway 12 near the road that led to the Weckler farm. However, she never made it home. She was last seen opening her family's mailbox. Witnesses say there was a dark-colored 1936 Ford sedan. Gein owned a 37 Ford sedan. Another young girl, Evelyn Grace Hartley, was 14 years old when she went missing on October 24th, 1953. She was babysitting for a La Crosse State College professor that night. Hartley's father planned to call at 8:30 p.m. to check in on her, but she didn't pick up his call. Concerned for his daughter, he drove to the professor's house to make sure everything was okay. When he arrived, the doors were locked, but the lights and the radio were on. He entered the house and saw the furniture had been moved, as well as his daughter's belongings. Her shoes were separated. One was downstairs while the other sat upstairs, and her glasses were broken. Hartley was nowhere to be found. Gein was questioned about her disappearance, and investigators looked for her remains in his home, but they couldn't find a trace of her at his property. Investigators also suspected Gein in the disappearance of Victor Harold Travis, a 42-year-old man who had been hunting near Gein's property. Despite being told not to, Travis disappeared on November 1st of 1952 alongside Raymond Burgess. After stopping at a bar in Plainfield, they left at around 7 p.m. Neither the pair nor the car was ever seen again. The last disappearance Gein was suspected to be involved with was that of his neighbor James Walsh in June of 1954. After Walsh went missing, Gein would visit his wife to help out with chores around the house. Gein was officially exonerated from any involvement in these deaths or disappearance after passing a lie detector test administered by investigators. Psychiatrists also concluded that it seemed his violence was only directed at women who resembled his mother. The other bodies found on Gein's property, and police found as many as 40 in his home he claimed he'd robbed from graves. As such, we may never know how many people fell victim to the butcher of Plainfield, but it is certain that Ed Gein stands as one of history's most disturbing serial killers. He's also seen as the inspiration for the mother-loving Norman Bates of Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre's skin-wearing Leatherface, and the Silent of the Lambs Buffalo Bill. Those movies have terrified generations of movie audiences, but they aren't quite as chilling as the real-life story of Ed Gein himself. So, guys, I know if you ever visited the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, Zach Bagans, he does have the cauldron that Ed Gein used. And he made a comment that he was removing the plastic or the, not the plastic, but he had like a protection glass around it and he removed it. And he was actually looking, I saw a post where he wanted some people to come in and investigate it and see what happened. I haven't heard anything else about that, but if I do, I will let you know. And guys, comment below who has seen the Netflix Monsters Ed Gein story. Comment below. Let me know if you liked it. Again, there is a review coming soon, so stay tuned. As always, if you like what you're seeing, click that notification bell so you know when I have new videos. Smash that like button. And to help a girl out, subscribe today at GraysonReport.com. I do need to keep the lights on. Electricity is going up. As always, I will see you on the next one, guys. Sweet nightmares and stay spooky.